Welcome, everyone. We're here for the fifth instance of the Monitor Forum. And this is a topic that we've already talked about multiple times. How do we as journalists deal with right-wing extremism? And we are having these discussions in the German public broadcasting companies, in the places where we work as private journalists. And we care a lot about these issues. And so it's really great to be back here at Republica. And so, yeah, 75 years after the German Grundgesetz and 80 years after the liberation of concentration camps, we're again having these discussions about Holocaust denialism, about racism. Does journalism need to cover these topics? Or, should German journalism have a anti-fascist tendency? And we want to talk about this today. Journalism between keeping in line with the German Grundgesetz and anti-fascism and plurality. And so, first of all, welcome Julia Kritian. And Ann-Kathrin Müller, expert on the far-right AfD party from Der Spiegel. And Thilo Jung, who's still young but not as naive anymore. Welcome. Yeah, so we're going to have a discussion. We already are having this discussion for a few years, right? And the political landscape sort of shifted. The AfD is, really about to take power. There were regional elections in Thüringen, German federal state, yesterday, and the results for them were quite extreme. And so, Julia, you have to deal with this a lot in the news, because in Eastern Germany, the AfD is such a big factor nowadays. And so all the recent successes that they had in elections, did that change your mind on how to deal with the AfD as a topic in the place that you work in the Eastern German public broadcasting sector? Well, you already mentioned it's not that new for us, right? What I think is new is that our perception it's sort of like a poison to democracy. And this perception is a phenomenon in all of Germany, West and East. And so Saxony and other Eastern states, the AfD there is very, very far right, almost far right extremist. And so, quote, some people said that, quote unquote, they were glad to see that also in other states like Bavaria or Hesse, the AfD was also very successful there. And so it's not just an Eastern German phenomenon, it's a German phenomenon. And so we have to keep asking the question, because there's no single answer to give. There's always these incentives, these events that make us think about this. And so, for example, this morning I had a discussion with a few colleagues. Yesterday, the German word Durchmarsch, this like straight passage to power. It resembles this sort of it evokes military images, and it really puts the AfD at the center as the actor. And so that to me really shows that even a single word can have an impact on the public discourse. Who do we see as a subject? Who do we see as an object? Yeah, so the real possibility of power is one thing, but now there's also the AfD in all three German states where there's local elections right now is seen as a far-right extremist. And we've also had this move in Europe in the last few weeks where European far-right parties don't want to have anything to do with the AfD anymore because they see them as too extreme, right? But still, the German public broadcasting companies have these, are being told that you have to treat them like a party as any other. I don't think they're a party like any other. And I think that it's important to state that. It's a party that really questions media and journalism as a whole, but especially us as public broadcasting companies. And so, for example, Höcke, their leader in Thüringen, he threatened to cancel the German public media contract. And so, yeah, they are, democratically elected, but they are the enemies of democracy. And I think that really changes how you deal with them from a journalism point of view. And one pillar that they rest on, is care when you go into the field to do reporting. Colleagues of us, that do interviews with people and they need a special sort of protection, or if you return from doing your job and then you find out you're being named online in certain forums. So this is not about my personal opinion, but like how I see it, being displayed in the media. For example, we have these major, large summer interviews with the most prominent figures, right? And you also do that with Höcke. And when you look at on the website, it's just like, oh, party A, party B, party C, and the AfD. And there's no real distinction. And so why do you do that? Why do you, have an interview with a far-right extremist, which you shouldn't have any illusions about his political agenda, right? I can relate very much to that question. And my personal opinion on that is, if you do a summer interview in Thüringen with Höcke, which is, not my department, someone else decided that, then I think you have to invite Höcke. They say you have to invite Höcke because he's elected as the leader of the AfD fraction. And last year I understood them in a way that the state of Thüringen is such a special case of German democracy, because there's almost no possibility anymore to form a coalition to actually take power because of the strange election results in comparison to other German states. And so should you, just because there's this far-right extremist Höcke, should you stop doing summer interviews with the faction leaders altogether? And yeah, so that's really something where you need to have a discussion about it, what worked, what didn't work, and what can we learn from that.
Thilo, you also do interviews with AfD politicians, and you do that like no other. You did a 6-hour interview with Maximilian Krah. Why do you believe this is the better way to deal with reporting on and with the AfD? Well, I didn't want to say that any way is the better way. We had the chance to do that, and we decided in favor of it. We decided not to do summer interviews where we interview all parties. And I'm also against the whole concepts. They're pretty bland and boring, and no one actually is interested in them. So why wouldn't you do it with just Höcke, and not for half an hour, but a longer time? So we decided in favor of the Krah interview because Of course, he's not an unknown in the German public, but most people didn't know who we were dealing with. Some people see him as a hero of the people who finally says what other politicians don't dare to say because they still have a conservative image. And he's just saying bullshit, I'm right-wing. And for a big part of the right-wing community, that makes him really interesting. And on the other hand, we have the Antifa, who says we don't talk to fascists, but then there's the group that thinks about voting for the AfD, has voted AfD, or will vote AfD just to prevent the Greens or left-wing parties to take over. Well, it was celebrated by right-wing people as a victory that they got this interview. In other words, so it's not in your hands what is being made of it. And isn't the danger too great that you give them fodder? Yes and no. Of course, you could have known that whatever happens in this interview, his crowd will share it and will make wild attributions and say this interview was won. And the only thing that they said in the interview is that the Übermensch Maximilian just owned the Untermensch Thilo Jung. And of course that usage was foreseeable, but we still decided in favor of it. And well, the cheers from the right wing is that a normalization in the mid of society, that long interviews give the impression, yeah, that's a politician like any other. We're giving them room and a space. And that this may open doors for people like that. If you watched the interview, I know you didn't watch it, you can't say that there was normalization in this interview. In contrary to ARD and ZDF, we don't constantly invite right-wing extremists. The last one was 6 years ago, because he was almost expelled from the party. A lot of other media, even the officers for the protection of the Constitution, have gained a lot of original quotes, and they even said that they were thankful to have originals footage of the inhumane utterances of the AfD. So what role do AfD politicians' appearances like Höcke in this summer interview or Krah at Thilo's format, what role do they play for the AfD? They're important for the AfD. You might think the AfD is very popular on social media. They have a lot of clout. That's true, but not with adults. They want to get out of this bubble they're in, and they use external events for that, like terror attacks, for example, and then they can go viral. But they also do so using the media, and I would argue, of course, it's normalization. If you sit down with this politician and use informal language with them, you have to think about where do you draw the line. Do you let them spread misinformation? That's another debate. But of course, there's a normalization effect. And the summer interview with Kalbitz, that was worse than the MDR summer interview with Höcke. I would say we are in times where democracy is being attacked from different direction, but especially from the direction of the AfD and other right-wing extremist parties. And in this time, we should think about whether the usual formats still work. And a summer interview is designed in a way that it's friendly, informal. They were sitting in front of a lake, and this person is a neo-fascist. And you can call Höcke a fascist, and we're in a format that is only used to appear normal and civilized. And it's not about whether there's cheers and clout on social media. It's about appearances. And the question is there really that much in between? What we're seeing, if you think about what has been uncovered the last few years and months, China activities, Russia activities, and still in half of the elections in Thuringia, they're successful. So we see that this is what the voters want. They want to vote against the system, and the system in their eyes, that's us. And to give them the same space as others who accept democracy is problematic. And this is why the AfD is happy about a lot of things and a lot of spaces that you may be willing to give them. All of what we try to tell ourselves as journalists, we have to disillusion them. We have to uncover their lies live in interviews and counteract them. Isn't that a strategy anymore, or are there formats where you could talk to right-wing extremists and fascists and neo-Nazis because you do not want to play into their myth that they're not being accepted by the mainstream media? Well, myths of victimizations, they'll always do that. It doesn't matter what we do, how fair we are, they will always find something. So that doesn't matter. The other question is, can we counteract them? Of course, we can counteract disinformation with facts, and we should do that. This is our main task. This is what journalists do: collect information, filter information, make information available. Who do we want to reach, and what do we want to do with that? The question is, election arena, I'm in favor of the AfD partaking. They're taking part in the elections, so you have to include them there. But the summer interviews in these times, having an AfD representative sitting there with an SPD, Greens, and so on representative, but why make a difference? In the public broadcasting guidelines, there's a principle that we have to defend the principles of democracy. So why don't we say we're not inviting them to the election arena because they're beyond our democratic principles? Well, we have to think about what it means. Are we being fair and including everyone, or is our approach to save democracy? So you should weigh these two principles against each other and gauge and discuss. I'm all in. But right now we're at a point where the AfD can be elected. So in the election arena, where it's about the voting programs, you have to expose the AfD. There's a good interview from Alexander Gauland at the ZDF where he's been interviewed about the pensions, and he was badly prepared and he just didn't know anything and repeated the same 3 phrases again and again. So this is what can work. And still, the question of normalization, a format that is designed to have casual conversation, is not the moment for these things. Okay, Julia, that was also directed at you. Do you think that we in the public broadcasting in the last few years, and I don't mean you personally, but as a watcher, were we too driven? This feeling of diversity also includes the AfD or the imagination of their voters. Didn't we take that too strongly into our program decisions? It's a difficult question because I can't speak for all of the ARD public broadcasting service. I think it's important to question yourself always. And this year, we're not doing summer interviews, but last year, the first question was, what would be your first deed in office when you're minister president? And the AfD representative didn't have a single idea. So yeah, you might say we're opening doors to them, but we're not too far apart. Yet you have to expose them. I would say it's impossible to do that because if you question their talking points again and again, the audience will have the impression that the speaker is always cut short. So we have to try out different formats. So the AfD is trying out another way. Yeah, there's an RD documentation where only the voices of people who left the AfD are heard. And there's a lot of feedback from people who said this really helped me to also understand what is going on in the minds of my friends and family who are voting AfD and how to deal with that. So to be ready to say, that the summer interview is also overestimated, overrated. The summer interview is a ritual, and we're ready to break up these rituals. Talks advancing this, you've said it less with, more about reporting on the AfD. That would be good, and I would like to come back to the concrete example. Those who really listen well did notice that he didn't have any good answers, but what most people heard is probably that the presenter thinks that the AfD person could be minister president. So this is being put into debate. So what would be the first thing you would do as a chancellor? In what world will Alice Weidel be a chancellor? Will Höcke be minister president? If all the parties do what they've promised, and well, the introduction is always, what will you do as a minister? I find it very problematic that we even give them the opportunity to have that person seen in that role. I don't want to say we're doing everything great, but all media always said, wow, 22%, 25%, 33% for the AfD. And what this tells people is, look, my neighbor is voting AfD. So many people are voting AfD.
Stichwort Normalisierung, Thilo.
Yeah, speaking of normalization, Thilo, you use the informal you in German when you interview people. And what's your stance when you're being confronted with being an enabler of this normalization of AfD politics? Yeah, I don't buy that at all. For example, this question about pension policy. You know, instead of talking to an AfD politician for 5 minutes, I did that for 3 hours. Take those topics, those fears that Germans really care about, pension, the social security state, it's affordable housing, it's Europe and the EU, where we know what people want from surveys. And so I confronted him with that. And if you listened, you could clearly see what sort of market libertarianism, undemocratic stance he's taking. And of course, you know, his fanboys will say he's like our hero because, you know, he's showing it to the traditional media, whatever. But really, I think it makes clear that, you know, we have this person who's very highly intelligent, has great education, and to show people what we're dealing with. And I'm a supporter of Der Spiegel, Monitor, whoever, you know, doing this work, telling what they're about. But us at Jung and Naiv, we show, we don't tell. We just show what these people are about, and I think every responsible adult is able to make up their own mind about that. And I think that's part of a healthy and sound democracy. Yeah, it's probably a thin line between normalization and revealing what they're truly about. But maybe, you know, it's not what topics are being covered when we are being interviewed. It's about being interviewed at all. It's not about being right or wrong, being like unmasked or whatever. I think that's like our own journalistic point of view that don't really matter to the AfD. The AfD just cares about the event itself, being part of the establishment, being recognized, being invited by major media. I think, you know, that's our real success as the AfD. What do you say to that? Well, I think this unmasking, I want to rebuke that. Because really the AfD has already, you know, unmasked themselves. The magic is gone, the genie is out of the bottle. And what was your question? You know, their strategy might be just about presence, right? Well, the AfD online and the social media, they have a bigger audience than all the other parties combined. And so now we can decide, well, let them keep doing that, and they can just like spew their propaganda without anyone negating what they're saying. Or we can invite them, and you have this, you know, theater play, so to speak, to where you have like politicians of all major parties and the one from the AfD, and that sort of like puts them in the spot as the victim. And so what we do is we have a one-on-one interview with them. We do our research beforehand. We keep asking about the questions we want to ask and having them actually answer. And you know, we don't cut them off. And so the criticism that we often get as journalists of like not letting them say what they want to say, not letting them finish their sentences. That's not something that you can blame us for. All right, so for me, the question, fascism never again, we keep talking about the AfD, and I want to know from the other people up on stage, if democracy, isn't just activism, but it's really part of our DNA as public broadcasting media, then how do we do that? How do we tell the stories of people in rural areas that are, organizing events that are, or for example, the victims of AfD politics? And if we just keep on talking about how do we handle the AfD, then we keep forgetting all these people that are also part of this conversation. Because, of course, what we report on is being driven by metrics, by what's in the news. And so how do we not put these extremists in the focus of our attention, but also like German civil society? Yeah, for me it's important to point out the AfD is far right within our political spectrum, but they are approachable. They have, for certain topics, their stances are very close to the stances of other parties that would also be invited to media events like this one here today. And so for example, this AfD politician Krah, he was in the CDU for 25 years. He was part of the CDU in Saxony, who are openly thinking about having a coalition with the AfD. And so, on the one hand, we have the AfD outside of the democratic spectrum, but they're much, much closer to other political parties. And so let's talk about these other perspectives, which we also have lots of internal discussions about that. So, how are we as a sort of diverse media being perceived from the outside? For example, Israel and Gaza, weapons exports to Ukraine, or COVID a few years ago. These topics are being heavily debated within society, and then there's people blaming us for not representing their points of view. And that might also lead to more election victories to the AfD, right? Yeah, and I don't mean that's like the AfD, but those are discussions we're having, right? Yeah, and of course, I think it's important to think about which opinions within a certain spectrum of opinions do you want to cover in your media coverage, like with Ukraine. And we're having these discussions, but I want to rebuke that, the major narrative victory that the AfD has achieved is that all of us as people working in media today are quote-unquote left-green scum. And I don't think like 30 years ago the media coverage would have been different. I don't think the people who are doing media changed. And so that's a question of perception, and that's because of the media where all of this discourse is being created, being shared, and then it seeps into the regular political parties and into the CDU, for example, and into the center of the discourse. And so, yeah, I'm a reporter on the AfD, so obviously I talk with them, but we don't. Yeah, and yeah, we don't do interviews with them anymore since 2017, not live and not like authorized interviews. And so I think it's very important to for me, I'm supposed to look at the party, at the AfD as a party, but I think it's also important for media reporting to, really look at the people who are in danger, who are the people who are part of civil society, who are saving democracy day after day, who are being threatened, who are being attacked, whose offices are being vandalized. And there's so many attacks that we don't know about because they're not being reported, because they don't want to be in the newspaper, because then they would be attacked again. And I think that's really a crisis that we need to deal with. And multiple people told me, I'm going to quit soon because from where I'm standing, it seems like Germany wants fascism because nobody does anything about it. And so, this has been the effect that we're dealing with. It's not that someone who cast their vote for the AfD is gonna change because there were so many people protesting in Hamburg against right-wing extremism. But it's really about like in smaller towns and villages to see like who's on the side of democracy. And I think this sort of binding together the democratic forces and empowering them, that's important. Yeah, and that's just what I was saying. For me, it's about how do we raise visibility for exactly this sort of democratic activism, right? And that's a larger question, a more important question than who's being interviewed for a major summer interview or not. But how we talk with the AfD is one thing, how we talk about them is another thing, and a third thing is how do we deal with the topics that the AfD tries to push. And of course, migration is probably the most important topic that the AfD has coined as theirs. And how do you feel about, do you think the coverage on migration changed because of the way the AfD influenced the discourse on that? Because of them. No, because people, are asking, is this really important because of journalistic reasons? Or is it just that you have these surveys and people started talking about, is 2015 going to repeat like this sort of mass migration in 2023? And suddenly this topic of migration became so relevant, so prominent in the German public news coverage that, that's what I mean when I say we're sort of being driven by certain emotions, certain narratives, right? And that, of course, helps to enable the AfD. Like, for example, the narrative of everyone's capabilities are gone, so we have too much migration that we can handle, and the German state isn't in power anymore to handle that in a good way. Well, I think all media, especially during elections, look at the topics that the people care about. And so, of course, there's this relationship, something begets something. And of course, we cannot avoid these topics altogether, but I think we have to question them a lot more. So, for example, the recent video from the German insula Sylt with far-right music in a bourgeois setting. It's a big scandal about all of that, but now there's these reports about events just like that from all over Germany, which were also captured on video. And oftentimes we stop with just a singular event and then don't look at, the phenomena behind it. Where's this video from? Who put it out there? Like, where does this sort of meme come from? And how, did someone push a party anthem for young people to be used as to convey your right-wing extremist views? And so, for example, and I want to add, the biggest gift that we can give the AfD is to push their topics to the front. All the talk shows do it. Der Spiegel does it, like with the recent cover featuring the German Chancellor about pushbacks. And if, even if Der Spiegel just like acts as there's this problem of immigration, we've never had more control of migration to Europe. But right-wing people keep saying otherwise. They're being quoted all the time, and the opposition and the parties in power, they have to answer for their immigration policies all the time. And with the AfD, you just know they're against foreigners.
And instead, there are extreme reasons why people vote AfD. It's not just racism and anti-Semitism. There are social reasons why people are turning away from the people in power, and we are not addressing these reasons enough. In the 20s and 30s in this country, this has already had reasons. And it's, again, economic and social problems that are the breeding ground for right-wing extremism, except monitor. Well, I would like to connect that. The outrage journalism, which Julia talked about, and the how shocked people are. And Katrin, is this something that you see as well in the reporting about these Sylt events? Isn't this something that reinforces right-wing populists? Yes, of course. In the past few years, we've seen that journalism, for economic reasons, really puts a focus on how are things read, and still this is viewed a lot by the audience, and I'm the first to criticize this. I also criticized our title. For the Scholz story, Scholz is the reason. If he says it like that, that's his problem. But coming back to the original question, in 2015 we were all overwhelmed. There was welcome culture that pretty soon backlashed. And there was a backlash that was too extreme. And in 2018-19, it was mainly politics that shifted the discourse, like politicians like the CSU conservative Seehofer. When a Green district leader suddenly says, well, I've always been in favor of migration, but now I can't be anymore, that evokes reactions. And in the past few months and years, there's been a lot of debate that we have a general shift towards the right wing that results in parts of the CDU and FDP, liberal and conservative parties, to become more extreme. Society has to partake and politics has to partake. When politics starts discussing things like Rwanda, deportation camps, you still have the questions of how much do you report on what, but still Migration is such a difficult topic where the discourse shift is underrepresented in the debate. And right-wing extremists just shit on our usual ways of communications, like email. They put politicians and also conservative politicians under pressure. And it's not just the citizens who are in question here. Yeah, let's stress this again. It's not the task of journalism to inform people about the topics they want to be informed about. It's not our task to go after that. Our task is to inform people of what they should know, not what they want to know. They can go read the rainbow press and yellow press on what they want to know, but not true journalism. Journalists inform. And who defines that? Thilo, who defines that? What people are going to be informed about? Yeah, that's journalism. Well, should is formulated very strongly. I think it's the big question between do we report on what happens or report on what we think is relevant. We had the same discussion a few years ago. What is important? Which topics should be reported on? What is current or what people are interested in? Yeah, many politicians are saying migration is an issue, and as a media company, I can't say, well, this shouldn't be relevant and people shouldn't be interested in that, especially when we have elections and there are election posters about this. We can't just say we're doing nothing on this topic. But you know that I don't think it's my task to to define what topics should interest people. But that's the point. We decide what is relevant and what is irrelevant. And if the population is interested in irrelevant topics, we should inform people about what they should be informed about so that they're better informed. Well, I don't think you would say the role of journalism is to correct or influence go with the politicians' rhetoric. Well, so we've got just 10 minutes left. We want to open up the talk towards questions. This is a topic that concerns everyone. This is a topic we want to discuss together, and we can't do that without you. So I see the first raised hand. Go ahead. Hi. Short question to Mr. Jung. The comments under the AfD video were very controversial and very much in contrast to what you usually get as YouTube comment. Did you notice anything in particular, any campaigns? Because the comments were so different from what you usually get. Yeah, it was posted in Telegram groups, and there were keywords on how you should give feedback. And it was the same again and again. He was so intellectual, and he was taking leadership, and Übermensch against Untermensch. That was basically the rhetoric. But doesn't that counteract your thesis, what you just said, that you have targeted campaigns on Telegram where a small interview is made into a big burning debate? So there were other raised hands. Well, we were talking about how things influence each other's. Media, left-wing or not, are losing trust you can't just continue and go on like you did before. So you kind of have to gear your content towards people. If less and less people listen to you, you can't just go on and report like you used to. Thilo? Loss of trust. People aren't watching us because we don't find the topics from the right-wing extremists important. I don't want to euphemize it, but I don't think there is a loss of trust as much as it's being purported. We've been doing this for a long time, and we've always gauged and had studies and surveys on how much people trust the NDR. And it was basically always the same. It was just 1% up or down, not 10%, not 20% up or down. There was always, like we're, in the trust ranking, we're directly behind the police. I think 80% of people say that they trust NDR. And a new representative study even surprised me. Every second young person between 16 and 29 says that they consume an NDR offer daily. I wouldn't have expected that. So I would actually argue against this thesis, because this word, lying media, they're not believing you and so on, but still this word is very widespread and it's used in daily discourse. And there's no simple answer to that. We need to explain how do we get our information. For example, on spring break, colleagues of us visited a festival and told people about how we make our news. We have monthly guided tours of our offices, and we will increase that offer. So it's not just one single solution. Also, we're going to the rural areas with our backpacks, and we're even taking entire formats into the rural scapes. And people can see MDR is here and is present. Is this the end of the whole debate? No, but I think it takes small steps and questioning yourself. Well, I entered journalism when AfD wasn't a thing. Without ever catering to a right-wing extremist motive, we always showed where there's lack of trust in the public broadcasting agencies because they've just done some bad reporting. For example, the Gaza war was a huge disaster from the German public broadcasters. And we have to stop pretending that because AfD is attacking ARD and ZDF, any criticism is irrelevant. No. CDU and so on are also influencing the public broadcasting services, and that is a problem. The political influence on ARD and ZDF. Are there any other questions? Yeah, there's two questions up here. Sorry, I was enticed to say something. Yeah, let's stay on topic. Thilo, when you said what people should know, I kind of had a bad feeling. In my view, the meta-narrative that make the right-wing extremists big is not just being disseminated by the right-wing extremists themselves. You kind of notch an agenda of educating the people And this is very enticing for many people in the population who are realizing there's a lot of people in power, and in my understanding, the agenda setting in the public discourse should be designed to be more free. Don't you, as media, make it too easy for those people to put out these narratives. Yeah, that's an intense debate, not just about AfD. Where does the education principle of the public broadcasting services end? Because we want to enable people to partake in societal discourse. So setting relevance criteria is not enough. We keep on deciding on these issues. So I resist when it's that that we should report does not mean that we're influenced from above. That's propaganda. We have an education directive. We have to look at journalistic relevance criteria. That's journalists' everyday knowledge. You can make it easy and just write clickbait articles, or you take up the journalistic challenge and you create enthusiasm for topics. Just one more question. I don't know if it's a question. Can these, well, the Sylt video is very telling of the fact that right-wing extremism is not just a thing of uneducated Saxons, but well, reporting is like, oh my God, they're from Western Germany and they're educated. I don't know why there's this notion. Yeah, it's a good thing that you're saying that. I wanted to say it too, but couldn't. Yeah, we're still dealing with a lot of cliches, stereotypes, like the poor people from Eastern Germany who've always been right-wing. There's been a shift in this country, and it's good that we're looking at that and understanding what to do, and not, but we're not giving them any stage we can. So thank you for that. And what's important to me, not just in the public broadcasting services, also in the comments for Thilo's videos, right-wing extremists, right-wing populists know exactly what they have to do to flood communities with their narratives. And I'm often asking myself, where is civil society at? That, well, journalists aren't driven by the right-wing extreme fringes, but by the body of society. So do partake in these discussions. Write to the broadcasting services so that it's clear that it's not just the right-wing voices who are dominating this debate. Thank you very much. Thank you, Julia, Ann-Kathrin, and Thilo. That was the Monitor Forum for this year. Thank you so much for coming.